Hello everyone, my name is Nicholas Valverde. The controversy me and Daniel are covering is dating young. More specifically, the topic is focused on this research question. Does dating in early adolescence impede developmental adjustment? I will be covering the yes side of the article, and Daniel will be covering the no side. Before diving into the study, it is important to review and examine prior research on this topic of dating young. Dating is a natural and important part of adolescents' lives. Many of their time is spent dating, trying to date, and even talking about dating with their friends. While dating in adolescence does appear to seem normal, early developmentalists such as Harry Stack Sullivan and Erik Erikson made a compelling argument in the 1950s that suggests that dating in adolescence helps teens have stronger functional interpersonal relationships later in life. However, most research on adolescent romantic relationships are focused on the negatives of adolescents engaging in romantic relationships. These negatives could include, but are not limited to, early sexual intercourse or other sexual activities, alcohol or substance abuse, parental defiance, and even delinquency. Other research has also assessed violence and abuse in adolescent romantic relationships. As you can see, romantic relationships in adolescence are often seen as a link to stressful experiences in adolescence. Research suggests that adolescents may even enter these romantic relationships for the wrong reasons, which include trying to get away from their family, gain popularity amongst their peers, and even to prove that they are mature. Prior research also suggests that these romantic relationships that adolescents find themselves in could also disrupt their friendships, parental relationships, and could even distract them from doing well in their academic endeavors. Experiences that come with the territory of romantic relationships, such as breaking up, could also invoke stress in adolescents by adding to one's negative view of their self-worth, self-image, and is linked to adolescents feeling betrayed, depressed, and even undesirable. Studies have suggested that being involved in romantic relationships in adolescence is a fairly common experience, but the associations it has with developmental outcomes are somewhat complicated. According to Mias and colleagues, and Neiman and colleagues, one complicated issue includes the positive association between involvement in romantic relationships in adolescence and delinquency. For the yes side of the argument of this controversy, the goal of this study is to assess the association between romantic relationships and delinquency in adolescence, but also how it affects their delinquency into young adulthood. This study will utilize a large longitudinal and nationally representative sample in order to assess two main research questions. Their goal is to examine whether or not romantic involvement in it is positively associated with delinquency with adolescents, and also whether the cumulative number of romantic relationships from adolescence to young adulthood is associated with greater delinquency in young adulthood. According to Brown and colleagues and Collins and colleagues, romantic relationships among adolescents were assumed to be of little importance and of brief duration. However, according to data from the National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent Health, also known as AdHealth, about 25% of 12-year-olds reported being in a romantic relationship within the last 18 months, and also 70% of 18-year-olds reported being in a romantic relationship within the last 18 months. The median length of romantic relationships for adolescents 16 or older was 20.5 months, according to a study done by Carver and colleagues in 2003. With dating in adolescence being quite prevalent, it may be associated with delinquency, according to Mias and colleagues. With this being said, the first goal of this article is to assess the connection between involvement in romantic relationships and delinquency in adolescence because prior research has shown some inconsistencies. For example, Mias and colleagues found that adolescents between the ages of 12 to 20 that were involved in romantic relationships displayed a higher level of delinquency compared to those not involved in romantic relationships. However, Van Deumen, Gonsi, Hayden, and Collins found that there is no association between romantic relationship involvement and delinquency and aggressive behavior in adolescence at age 16. In addition to this study also aims to assess whether or not the cumulative history of romantic relationships from adolescence to young adulthood is associated with delinquency in young adulthood. Some studies have touched upon the issue of the cumulative association between romantic relationships and delinquency, but only in adolescence, not in young adulthood. An example of this would be how Zimmer Gambic and colleagues found that frequent romantic relationships were associated with increases in delinquency, aggression, and other externalizing behaviors from ages 12 to 16. This study is the first to examine the association between accumulation of romantic relationships and delinquency from adolescence to young adulthood. The researchers propose that the number of relationships from adolescence to young adulthood is positively associated with delinquency in young adulthood. Now that we have covered the two main goals of this study, we can now get into the specifics of this study. Some adolescent characteristics were controlled in this study because earlier studies have linked these characteristics with delinquency, such as age, pubertal timing, gender, and race/ethnicity. They also controlled for relationship quality and also relationship length. Researchers drew data from AdHealth. At Wave 1, at-home interviews were given to 20,175 students in grades between 7 and 12 in 1995. These interviews included topics like social and demographic information, risk behaviors, sexual partnership, and formation of romantic relationships. In Wave 2, 14,738 students were surveyed 1 year after Wave 1. The number decreased because some students graduated. In Wave 3, 15,197 participants from the original sample were interviewed in order to investigate the influence that adolescents had on young adulthood. This study focused on measuring delinquency, romantic involvement, number of romantic relationships, and other variables were assessed, such as age, pubertal timing, race and ethnicity, parents' education, relationship length, and relationship quality. The results of this study were quite interesting. This is that the mean level of delinquency was highest at Wave 1 while decreasing over time. Another finding worth mentioning is that 66% of the adolescents reported having had romantic involvement in the past 18 months at Wave 1. An interesting finding also worth mentioning is that the average number of relationships during the 6-year study period from Wave 1 to Wave 3 was 3.56. Their results suggested that there was a significant and positive association between romantic involvement and adolescent delinquency at Wave 1. The association between age and delinquency was also significant. This finding suggests that younger adolescents were at increased risk of participating in delinquent behavior. Pubertal timing was also significantly associated with delinquency. Results also displayed that adolescent girls were at lower risk of delinquency compared to adolescent boys. It was also found that the number of romantic relationships during the period between Wave 1 and Wave 3 contributed significantly to higher risk of delinquency in young adulthood. Age was significantly and negatively associated with risk of delinquency. This suggests that younger participants showed increased risk of delinquency at Wave 3 compared to older participants. Pubertal timing was only slightly associated with delinquency. When it comes to gender, female participants showed much lower risk of delinquency at Wave 3 compared to male participants. Other results also showed that even though dissatisfaction with one's current relationship was positively linked to delinquency, the number of relationships still remained significant. However, the length of one's current relationship was not significantly associated with delinquency. In conclusion, there was a relationship found between delinquency and adolescent romantic relationships. Younger adolescents were found to be at a larger risk than older adolescents for engaging in delinquent behavior. A cumulative effect of relationship history on delinquency and criminal behavior in young adulthood was also found. To conclude the video, I would just like to point out 3 concepts that were very persuasive from this study. The first one would be that relationships definitely stress out an adolescent because it can interfere with school and family obligations. Another persuasive point from the study is that adolescents are more likely to participate in questionable activities in order to impress their peers or their romantic interests. Lastly, another persuasive argument found is that the more relationships the adolescent was in, the more likely they are to partake in delinquent activities even up into young adulthood. Thank you for listening and watching my video presentation. I hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting. Have a great rest of your day.